Hi, recording. You just missed the introduction. So, the difference between a web app and a website. So, the website, uh, it's just basically there only for reading. So, you're really only using it to get information. It's just a static page. Very little interactions. You're just like clicking on images and playing videos and that kind of thing. A web app, on the other hand, it's a lot more dynamic. So, there's a lot more functionality, a lot more complex interactions that you can do. And previously, this was only possible through downloading something, right? So, like Microsoft Word, in the past, you'd have to download it, and that was like a whole thing. But nowadays, we actually have web apps where you can actually use these things online because of this. So, you don't need to download anything anymore, especially for this workshop. You actually don't need to download anything because it's all online. And so that's like super awesome. So if you want to develop like a robot or like any kind of UI, you can actually just do that now through your browser, which is like super cool. This is actually like a relatively new thing too. It's like 2013, I think. Anyway, so how does a web app work? Well, there's three parts that you need to know. There's three different languages. There's the structure, the HTML, just like the instructions to a website. There's the paint, I like to call it the paint, the styles, which is CSS. And then there's also the functionality part of it. That's the JavaScript. So these three things together make a web app. And maybe it's a little more useful to see in terms of an analogy. So here we have a house. So the two by fours and like, I don't know, I'm not a civil engineer, the nuts and bolts and stuff is like your structure. That's your HTML language. The paint and like the windows and doors and stuff, that's your CSS, your styles. And then the electricity that runs through the house, that's like your JavaScript. Um, so JavaScript tends to be kind of invisible, honestly. Like you don't really know it's there until you click on something. So for that reason, we actually call HTML and CSS markup languages, not programming languages. If you call it a programming language, a lot of people are going to get mad at you. So just don't call it that. They're markup languages. They're the visual side of a web app, while the JavaScript is more like the functional side. Cool. Okay. So I want to show you an example of a web app. It's a website I've been working on for a while now. I think it's some of my best work. I love it a lot. I hope you guys are going to be impressed with it too. So here it is. I know. Get your oohs and your ahs out. It's something. No, this is garbage, right? And this is garbage because it's only showing one thing. Does anyone want to take a guess at which of these three things this website is showing? Yeah, exactly. It's the HTML. And it's HTML because, like I said, JavaScript's kind of invisible. We can't really see if there's JavaScript here, and it doesn't look pretty, so it can't be CSS, right? So it's the HTML. And maybe this looks familiar. Not like my website, that'd be kind of weird. But like maybe if your internet went out and you clicked on Google at the same time, maybe you saw something that kind of looks similar with like the Times New Roman and the blue links. Because this does tend to happen when your internet goes out, it just shows the HTML. So how can we make this look prettier? Well, we can do that with yes. Good job, guys. So yeah, you can add CSS to this to make it look a little better. So for example, that learn more button, if I wanted to make it look pretty, I could say, hey, let's make it yellow. And okay, we've made it yellow, and now it's like super long. So, with CSS, we should resize it, maybe center it, change the fonts, and let's round the edges to make it look a little more modern. And so we've just applied CSS to this button. So you can repeat this process. It's not as tedious as it sounds to the entire website. And eventually you can get something that doesn't look like it's trying to steal your credit card information or something, right? So no CSS, with the exception of the button. CSS. No CSS, CSS. So CSS is very important. Please don't neglect it in your web app. I know like functionality is like arguably more important, but like, come on. It's like so much better when you have it. But anyway, I know you guys want to start coding and stuff, so uh, please open your laptops and go to this link. Is there anyone in here, by the way, that has no coding experience? Yes. Okay, that's good. And while you're there, by the way, do log in just in the top right. You can log in with Google or GitHub or whatever else is there. Um, yeah. All right, is everyone there? Cool. So, oops. So go ahead and log in. Oh, that's spoilers. You didn't see that. Okay, is everyone logged in? Sorry. You should be seeing this. Actually, there you go. Close that up. Yeah. Okay, everyone's good? Okay. So what the heck are we looking at here, right? So first of all, I want you to just really quickly just like press enter and delete down here just to see that you can edit it. If you can't, just come up here and click fork, and that'll do the same thing. So if you can't edit it, cool. So what are we looking at here? Let me go full screen. Let me zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so there's 3 panels here. The first panel on the left is your file explorer. Self-explanatory, that's just where all your files are. Don't worry about this public folder, you don't need to touch it. Same with this package thing. Don't know what it does, so you don't need to know either. This middle window is your coding window. Self-explanatory, you just code in there. And then this far right window is your viewport. This is like a preview of what your web app is actually looking like. If you want to open it in a new tab, you can see this URL right here. You can also just click this button, and it's like the full thing. I do encourage you, though, to just keep it in this view, just so it's a little easier. Yeah.
Is that supposed to open up for everyone? The preview?
I've been the new tab. I just copy and paste the same link. With the link.
I mean, are you saying like you don't see Hello World on this side?
Copy the link. Sign in first. Copy the link and then. Copy the link.
Oh, yours is the bigger one.
Yeah, so you copy the link though.
Okay, for. And okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's okay. There we go.
Yeah,
Cool.
okay, great.
So everyone sees the screen, right? Sorry, I should have asked first. Okay. I'm gonna give you guys a second just to. Cool. Okay, well while that's happening, I'm just gonna go back to the slides for the sake of time. And before we start coding, like what exactly are we looking at here, right? Like what the heck is this? If you've never used JavaScript before, this is probably very confusing. So let's talk about components. So what you see, I've kind of simplified it a little bit because there's some more advanced stuff that is by default in there. This is a component. And the components, you can think about it like the visual part of your web app. So you have things like, I mean, you can think of it like building blocks, right? You have like images, you have text, and you just like put them together to make a web app, right? And so, I forgot about this. This is like so random, but like I found like 2 of the same image, and you could tell they just like colored over the blocks, and they just like cropped out this poor guy, like put a new kid there. Anyway, I put both of them there because you can tell which one is using CSS, right? One on the right? All right. So what are we actually looking at? So this is JavaScript if you've never seen it before. The way you make a JavaScript function is you just do function, name of the function. On the inside, you return an output. In this case, you can see it's just returning one thing. And even if you know JavaScript, that might look a little weird. That's because that's HTML. And even if you've coded before, this is probably really weird having like 2 languages in the same editor. And this is something we're going to do a lot. We're just going to like switch back and forth between HTML and JavaScript. And it honestly gets kind of confusing. So just bear with me. So yeah, this is just a JavaScript function that's returning an HTML component. Cool. If you want to get more technical, this is actually not really HTML. It's JavaScript in disguise. We call this JSX. If you have no idea what I just said, that's okay. You can just stick with this. I know I am, because it's easier to refer to that as just HTML. So, any questions about that, by the way? Cool. Okay, so there's a lot of different components. You can see this one here is an H1 component. You denote a component with these angled brackets, by the way, and you close it with a slash. So what is H1? Well, H1 just means a header of style 1. So you have a bunch of different styles here. So like H1, H2, you have P for paragraph. This div means a container, so you can put multiple things in the container. There's also images and inputs and buttons. There's so many that I'm not putting on this slide, but there's a ton. There's like drop-down menus and like videos, and you can make your own. It's there's a lot. But this is the way you do it. You just define it like this with angle brackets, and then in between you put what you want to put. In this case, hello world. So it looks like this. Okay, so let's actually code something like this. So I want everyone to go to app.js. Just make sure you're on that file, and I don't need this. And just select everything, and I want you to delete it because we're going to start from scratch. Okay, so you're going to get a big fat error. That's fine, just means there's nothing there. So how do we make a JavaScript component? We just do function, and then by convention, we name the component, the name of the file. So in this case, app with the uppercase A, and then parentheses, curly brackets, and just hit enter. I'll get back to the parentheses later. That's important later on. But for now, we're just going to ignore it. Just put the parentheses there. And then now we're going to make a component. So we're going to go return. And then let's do a header like was on the slides, right? So h1. And then I like closing it first so I don't forget. That's like one of the most common mistakes is you just forget to close it. So I like opening it and then closing it first just so I don't forget. And then we can do like, I don't know, hello world or something. Okay. So a couple things. First of all, big fat error. What the heck? That's because we're not really sending it, I guess, to the renderers. Kind of a weird way to think about it, but the way you would actually export this is you just do export default and then the name of the component app, and then you should see it. So kind of a weird thing you have to do there, but there we go. Okay, everyone see the screen? Good? Cool. Okay, so let's say I wanted to add another component, right? Let's say I wanted to add a paragraph below this that's like, I don't know, it says something else. So the way we do that is when we want to add multiple elements, we start with a parenthesis, and then we close it like that. So it's just convention, like, yeah. So, so do the parentheses like that, and then if we want to add another component, we could be like, okay, p, and then I'm going to close this so I don't forget, so /p, and I'm going to write something else like, I don't know, like what's up or something. And now you'll see that we get another error. So what's going on here? So as it turns out, JavaScript can only return one component at a time. And so you might think like, well, that's really tedious because now I have to make, a component or like a function for each component. That's not true. We can actually trick it a little bit. By the way, is anyone still working up here? We're good. Okay. So we can trick JavaScript a little bit because, like I said, it only can return one thing. Recall that I said this thing is a container, and we can put multiple things in this container called a div. So we can actually get away with just returning one thing, which is a div, and we can nest these two inside of that div. So how do you do that? So first, just before the first component that you want to nest, just do a div, but don't close it because you're going to close it after the last thing that you want to nest. So /div at the end here. And if you save, it should just automatically, remove that semicolon if you had that there. It should like auto format it when you save, by the way. I'll give you guys a second to catch it up here. Okay, so let me recap what I did. So I had these two components. JavaScript doesn't like that. It only wants to return one. So I nested these inside a bigger div component. Got it? Any questions about the concept so far?
I noticed that if you type just like anywhere inside the div, it automatically selects like the P format. Is that just like a function of like JavaScript? Because if you just like type anywhere in there, like on the next line.
Oh, yes. Okay, that's a good question. Yeah. So if you just type, I believe this is actually something called a span, which is a little different from P. I think when you have a P, let me just test this theory. Yes, okay, this is, oh, wait, no. No, it's not a span. It is P, okay. So if you're wondering what a span is, like what the heck are you talking about, Grant? A span is the same thing as a paragraph, but you can actually have line breaks in it. So there you go. So yeah, it's a good observation. There you go. Okay, so oftentimes when we nest something like this, we're not actually going to use this div, right? So it's kind of useless. like I said, we're just tricking JavaScript with it, so we don't really like that there. So by convention, we just actually remove div from this, and we get these like empty brackets. You can see it's a little cleaner. So we just do that by convention. You can keep it if you want, but it just looks cleaner, right? We call that a fragment, by the way, in case you were wondering the technical term. But yeah, that's kind of the basics of it. Let me see if I think I did something else. Okay, so let me first, right. So let's say I wanted to add more components, right? So you could, if you wanted to, keep adding components to this function, and it'd be like really long, right? It'd be super hard to navigate. So we don't actually do that. That's just like a big no-no. So we want to actually just make individual files for each component. So what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, first thing you want to do is go to the source folder and right-click on it. Okay. Then I want you to make a new folder and call that components. Components. Cool. You can name it whatever, but by convention, we just name it components because that's, that's what it is. So then right-click on the components folder and then do new file. And, excuse me, we're going to call this new file card with a capital C, by the way, .js. JS is the JavaScript extension. So then hit enter. And we've just made a new component. Look at that. So we need to fill it out first, of course. So, do your standard function and then name of the component, which again, by convention, is the title of the file, parentheses, curly bracket, right? And then again, I'm just going to kind of do what we've seen previously. So return, and then, whoops, return, parentheses. Okay, now we can type in whatever components we want, right? We do know we want multiple components in here. So what should we do if we know we want to have multiple components?
Make a div.
Yes, make a div. In this case, you can keep it as div. I'm just going to keep it as a fragment, so just empty. See. Yeah, by the way, when you like save, it auto formats, and sometimes it's annoying, I'm not going to lie, because when you have one component, it just like puts it back. So if that happens, I'm sorry, just fix it. There we go. Okay. And then in here, so by the way, if you don't know what a card is, it's basically just like a little box that has information in it, and you can just like copy it multiple times with different information. That's all you need to know about that. So I want to add a card. Let's say we want to make like a menu or something. So I'm going to have like in this particular card, maybe like H3 style of header style of H3 or a header of style 3. So it's like a little bit smaller than like the header here. I'm going to close this so I don't forget, right? And I want to make this one like a cheeseburger, right? Okay. So a few things. First of all, nothing's showing up. There's two reasons for that. The first one is we need to export this the same way we did in this app file. So we're just going to do export default and then again the name of the component, so card. Cool. I'll give you guys a second to catch up. Is there anything anyone wants me to explain more in detail about? I feel like I'm kind of going fast. Nothing? I'm just that good at teaching it. No. Okay. So once you have this, a couple things. First of all, like nothing's showing up. Why is that? Well, like I said, the first reason was this. So we added export default card. The second reason is app is like our main file, right? So we want to put everything in this app file. So we want to also import our card to the app file. So how do we do that? Well, it's convention to, actually, I don't even think it's convention. I think you have to put it at the top. So you do import and then card and then from and then the file path. So the file path in this case is going to be dot. Dot means the current folder, so source, and then slash components. You can just hit tab and then slash card. Cool. Yeah.
Why is app?
So like for all web apps, you do need like a main file so that it know like everything basically feeds through this one file here because this is like what's actually going to be rendered in the viewport.
So how do we determine like which one?
Oh, so you're saying like,
Like why is it not?
oh, okay, so think of app like, okay, so each of these files are components, right? So app is a component of components. Card is a component of components. App is like, it's the main one. How do I put this? Think of it like, I'm trying to think of an analogy now. Okay, think of it like a house, right? Okay. So if the property is app, the parts of the house are going to be inside an app because you can't just like you can't just have like a random door and call that the app. Like you need to put that like inside the property, which in this case is app. And like the way we say it's not card is like we want to import like the different components to the property, I guess. I feel like this is not making sense.
So it's the one you're importing everything into is the main one.
Yeah, it's like it's just think of it like literally it's just the main file, and we want to put in order to show any components we make, we need to put those components into the main file. And the way we do that is through this import command here. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. By the way, I think maybe this will make more sense for this next step because we're still not seeing anything here. So all we've done, by the way, when we made this file was we just made a component. We're not actually using it anywhere. So like I said, custom components are something you can do. So because we now imported card, we now have that component. So we can just type in card. And then again, you can close it like this. And so now cheeseburger shows up. So maybe that makes a little more sense now. Like you're just importing components into the main app file. Okay. So by the way, there's an inefficiency here because there are some components which we call self-closing. So you don't actually need to close it. In the case of H1, it wouldn't make sense to like have a self-closing thing because then you wouldn't be able to put anything in there. So the way you self-close something is you just put a slash after the first time you open it, and then you don't do the closing bit. Because we don't need to add anything in between there because we've already done that in our file. So questions? We're good? Okay. So it just says cheeseburger. That's kind of weird, right? So go back to your card file. And maybe we want to put like the price or something, right? So maybe, we could have a P here. Again, close it so you don't forget. And I don't know, a cheeseburger is like $19.99 or something, we'll say. Let me get my code here. Okay. So obviously not very flattering, right? So what we're going to do next is we're going to use CSS to make this look a little more better, right? It's just kind of like weird how it's just the text. So go ahead, if everyone's okay with moving on. Okay. Go ahead and click on styles.css. Okay. So right away, you're probably like, what the heck is this? This is just a bunch of default styles that they so kindly just, put in here for us. It's why it doesn't look like this example I showed earlier. Don't do this, but if I deleted everything, you can see it now looks like that. But they just, put it in here because it saves you time, right? It's more modern looking. So I'm going to keep it there because I like that style. But like, what are we actually like looking at here, right? So the way this works is you define the thing you want to apply styles to. In this case, like H1, you can see the styles are defined here. Don't worry about what's on the inside right now. We're going to get to that in a little bit. And then, yeah, but on the inside, you just define what you want it to look like, right? So I'm going to come up to the top here and just give myself some space. And we're going to try to style this card that we just made. Okay. So I'm going to type in period. That period, I'll come back to in a little bit, but I'm just going to type in card. And then open brackets, hit enter. And then I'm going to do, so there's a ton of different properties you can apply to something. in this case, I'm going to choose the one called border. So you type in the property you want to modify, a colon, and then followed by the way you want to style it. In this case, you just have to know how to do this, but I'll just show you right now. You do the line width. I'm just going to do like 1 pixel. You do the type of line. By the way, px does mean pixel. You do the type of line, which is solid, and then you do the color. I'm just going to do black. Okay. So, nothing happened. So like, what the heck? What's going on, right? So we've defined a style here called card, but we never actually assigned it to our card. So nothing's happening. Yeah.
So it's the size, and then what does solid do again?
Yeah, so maybe it's a little easier to see if I do this next step first, and then like we can change it as we go along. So go back to your card, and then okay, so I made a mistake here. We actually want to use this div, so I'm gonna actually bring back div if you did the empty. Sorry about that. And it's gonna freak out because there's a semicolon there. Cool. Nope. Wait. What happened? What happened? That's weird. Oh, sorry. I had the slash in the wrong place. Okay, so yeah, put the div back if you got rid of it. Okay, so like I said, we defined card in our styles. So the way we assign it to the card, and to answer the question, this is when it will like actually appear. You do class name with a capital N equals, and then in quotes, what we named it on the style sheet. So we named a card, and but bang, look at that. There's a border there. Cool. So yeah, what the heck did we just do, right? So basically, whenever you have a component, you can add things called properties. So in this case, I'm adding a property called class name, and I'm setting that equal to a string called card. And so the styles sheet, it's going to pull that property called class name and look at this giant list and find card. Now this period means referencing a class. So you can notice these ones don't have periods because they're just the elements, or they're just the raw components like H1. When you're defining a class, you need to put the period. Don't know why it's like that, but that's how it works. Just the period means class, followed by the name of the class. And so yeah, to go back to what you were saying, what is this actually doing? So this first entry here is the border size. So you can see if I change it to like 10 pixels, whoa, it's like, it's 10 pixels. You can also do a dashed line. I'm not going to do that. It's like a little more advanced. And you can change the color. Like if I wanted to make it red, then it's red. Look at that. Any questions so far? No? Okay, cool. Okay, so obviously like that looks hella ugly. Like I don't like that. So instead, I'm going to like, first of all, instead of red, I'm going to do, if you're familiar with hex codes, you can do hex codes. So actually, you can also, little pro tip, you can just click on this box. Okay, sometimes it doesn't work and just whatever. But you can click on it, and sometimes, I don't know why, like it doesn't do it all the time. You can like use the color picker, but in this case it doesn't work, so whatever. I'm just gonna do a hex code that I thought was kind of nice. So like C9, C9, C9. You don't have to do that one. You can make it red, like I don't care. But yeah, that's how you add a border.
What's the hex code for Archimedes?
FFC 800.
How do you remember that?
I don't know how I remember this. Yeah.
Could you go back to where you implemented like the box? Like
This thing? Okay, yep.
for some reason
Getting error. Yep. Okay, so there's a common oh, so double slash and CSS is not common.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to point
I
out.
was
So
trying to do the commenting and then they kept doing
yeah,
weird stuff.
okay. So yeah, that's a good thing to mention, by the way, is like these are three different programming languages. So like I know this is like kind of hitting hard, like three programming languages at once. And like I said, it's going to get very confusing. So you have like JavaScript here, HTML here, and then you have CSS here. So the syntax is not the same. So even though double slash in JavaScript is common, that's not the same for CSS. I believe the way you do comments in CSS is like, no, that's HTML. Point is, maybe that proves the point that it's just like really convoluted sometimes because you have three different languages. Anyway, okay. Did you figure that one out?
No, it's still
Oh, okay. Here, let me.
It's-
Oh.
that was okay. Let me do that.
Right.
Is it because the capitalization was just that better? Like hard uppercase, lowercase, but that's because we defined this one as lowercase. So I guess
Yeah,
that
it should be okay. I'm not sure. Honestly, like, I don't know, like that's.
Does it say?
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
just like.
Yeah.
Um,
It's okay. I don't know why. I always come up with the weirdest things. Even in my like lab, I just come up with like it's not working. I didn't know.
like, yeah, that's so easy.
Yeah.
It should be working.
I thought I did.
I don't know. It's not good.
Is anyone else having like issues with it?
It's okay. I mean, it's just a box.
Well, like we're gonna like actually style this like properly. So like I'm gonna make sure.
At least it didn't work.
Yeah. Colors of
That is so weird. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine is
Is there
also
like
not.
a no? There's no comment
Mine's
between
also
all
not
these
doing
three
it
things.
formatting.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, mine must have an bearing at all.
Oh.
Like, if I
Yeah, did
tried
you,
making different accounts with like different Google accounts and it doesn't work.
oh, this is weird.
Like, sometimes I sign in, it just doesn't render.
So
Oh, okay. So go ahead and click fork. Yeah, if you don't see fork in parentheses up there, by the way, like.
Just right on the phone with a Google Doc.
Oh yeah.
So it's
Okay. And then, yeah, go ahead and copy it into. It just updates automatically. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna walk around and just like see if we go on. Nice.
No.
Okay, yeah, so. Okay, that's it.
I know I'm not gonna be up little.
yeah,
It's like
trying to
right
look that up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's like a browser.
What are you talking about?
What are we talking about?
So I'm calling this
I show up cheeseburger.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, what browser are you using?
From
Yeah. I'm using.
Yeah,
That's
I-
from
I showed up to
Oh,
my
okay.
house this week.
wait, Astro?
She's not importing cards.
I know you were in the Astro.
Oh, I was in the Astro one.
Yeah, and then
The pre-cheese.
Okay.
That we call the Astro one. And the Infinite one.
It keeps running the saves, and then every time it's just like in
I almost lost it.
Holy shit. Okay.
What is that?
Oh,
How many were you going to?
That's Ohio. What?
How many did you go to?
I went to Tuesday.
Thanks.
I went to Tuesday.
Yeah, right.
That's annoying. Yeah, I thought you said.
Oh, do you know
Yeah.
what you changed?
Solid. That's probably what's wrong.
Oh, okay. That'll do.
Yeah. Wait, 6. I went to.
Is it Archimedes?
Ah, okay. See, okay, that's.
I'm not.
I should have done that with theirs as well.
But then again,
Use
I'm
the
not on
console.
that stuff.
It's like says don't me.
I'm just
Okay,
trying
so
to
it's a class thing with the
something.
lowercase.
It's like I got the link.
Yeah, it's all the same.
There we go. Okay. Yeah. Oh wow. I need to remember that the console's a thing, and I need to do that.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. We do.
We figured. There's a lot of
This one time.
Oh, do I?
Oh, yes. And I didn't know I.
Oh wait, you're just.
I tried to change it. They told me that it's
She isn't.
Oh, like reverse that. Maybe just like it changes from the top.
Is it real?
That is what I
Oh, see, so this line in for card.
No. This is strap.
But then,
Just don't eat out.
because you want the app
It's
into
just like
the
spend that money on that.
you want all the components to be.
This is for CS, but yeah.
And then,
I went for 16.
That's a big scale. What's ended?
Oh, we like there's a cheese that's going on.
Oh, oh, why is it like lowercase? That's really
Yeah.
okay. Then just go to the app. I guess.
The centers.
Yeah, that's really weird.
People with full-time jobs.
Yeah, sorry guys, I didn't know J from the software.
Yeah.
Eighty centers? Just 80 centers?
Wait, where's it going? You can use that in a public.
Um,
So I just keep scrolling.
How do I do this? I'm almost like thinking.
Do you
Yeah.
want to this
Oh, it's okay.
Should we have these brownie plates or something for whoever came from leaving?
I don't know.
Yeah, let's.
I don't know.
I used to do that.
Okay, let's keep going. So, yeah, I have to apologize. I didn't know that the software was like so weird, honestly. By the way, just like a pro tip, if you get an error or like something's not working and you don't get an error, if you right click on the viewport and hit inspect and go to console, okay, ignore that. And then you hit refresh, it'll tell you all the errors that's happening. In this case, there's no errors because it's fine, but yeah, I mean, you don't have to remember that. If you have an error, then you can just wave me over there and I'll figure that out. Yeah, so sorry about that, guys. Okay, as you can see, web apps are not quite polished yet, I guess, right? So let's make this look a little prettier, right? So it's just like a box right now. That's kind of lame. So let's say I wanted to round the corners, right? So, and again, these are things that you just learn over time, like the different properties of CSS. I'm sure there's like a huge list somewhere. The property we're going to use is called border hyphen, and if you can see it, like it also suggests, you can see there's just a ton, even though I just typed in border. But we're going to use border radius, and I'm going to do like, I don't know, 10 pixels, semicolon. And look at that, it's like rounded the corners. That's pretty cool. Okay, we're good.
That's a general question.
Uh-huh.
You said like this is like 10 minutes ago, but you're saying that they gave us a bunch of styles. Just who is they? Is it just like IO?
That's a really good question. This is just a template I found online, just like a get started template. And so by that, I guess that's what I meant. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you're gonna make a new project and it's not in Code Sandbox, you're not gonna have any of this. You're gonna have to type all this yourself. So, do you have a question?
I was just wondering what like the radius, like is that how many pixels are in?
Yeah, that just means like how many pixels. Like this is a circle, right? So the radius is this. So you're just saying like for each corner, I want to round it by this much. So let me demonstrate by changing this value. So if I said like 50, you can see it's like it's big, right? It's like 50 pixels as the radius. Does that answer your question? Okay, cool. I don't like 50 though, so we're gonna go back to 10. That was excessive. Okay, so what are we doing on time? Okay, you got time. You got time. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to card because I want to add an image of a cheeseburger. That sounds pretty cool, right? So above my header, that's just my preferred way of putting the image in there. You don't have to put it above the header. I'm gonna do img for image, and don't close this one because this is one where you self-close it. And you're probably like thinking like, what, like how are we gonna put the image there if it's self-closing? The image component is a little weird because you actually add it as a property. So you do after img, you do src, which stands for source equals, and then quotes. So yeah, like I said, it's a little different from the other components, but that's just how you do it with the image. And I'm just gonna like look up a picture. I'm gonna wait for you guys to copy that. No errors, like we're good. Good. I'm gonna look up a picture of a cheeseburger. So I don't need cheeseburger results close to me, so no thanks. Okay, so look up a cheeseburger on Google Images, or like whatever food you chose. Like, what is that? Like, yeah, sure, let's go with that. A cheeseburger pizza, that's pretty awesome. So once you find the image you like, right click on it and do copy image address. Not copy image address, okay? And then you paste the address of that in between these quotes here. And so now we have a gigantic pizza, or sorry, cheeseburger. Yeah, well, let's double down on this. Yeah, cheeseburger pizza. There we go. And yeah, that's gourmet, right? That's 199 bucks. Okay. Is everyone at this step? Okay. So obviously that is huge, right? Like I don't want to picture like that massive. So we're gonna go back to our styles and we're going to resize the image using our styles. How do we do that? So you might think we could just do img, and you could. So I'm gonna do that. So I'm gonna do img with no period because it's not a class name. This is an actual component that we're modifying. So img, curly brackets, and let's say I want the width of this thing to be 80 pixels. That's another, again, property that you just have to kind of pick up with time. Actually, let's go 200. Yeah, that's nice. Okay. So there's my image. It's now smaller, which is nice. However, sometimes like when you have multiple cards, you don't want all the images being different sizes, right? And we'll get to multiple cards in a little bit. But in that case, I'm going to add a height value as well. I'm going to say 80 pixels. And now it just looks ridiculous, right? So the way you would fix that, it's stretched, like that's just stupid, is you would do this other component, or not component, property, called object fit. And you see there's like a bunch here. We're going to do cover. And now what it's doing is it's just cropping the image to match this width and height. And you can kind of see this when I modify like height, for example. You can see what it's doing. It's just like cropping it so that it fits in that box. In this case, I'm just going to keep it at 80. Okay.
So what if you have like multiple images? Like how would you know which?
Oh yeah, yes. Thank you for mentioning that because I actually forgot. So remember when I said you might think this is okay, just putting img. So what you can actually do is you can define like multiple criteria, right? So I could say I want an image, and this image has to be of the class .card. And so this is a way where you can isolate images only in your card. Is that what you were trying to ask?
Yeah, but what
Okay.
if you have multiple images within the card? Like, could you do image 2, image 3? Like, you just add numbers like you do in Java?
So by default, this is going to modify every single image that's both a card and image. If you wanted to do like separate images, you can do things called IDs. So you can give an image an ID. I'm not going to go into that. That's kind of like out of the scope. Even though it's honestly not that difficult. You just do ID equals. But yeah. Another question. Okay, so a couple problems. The first problem is that this box is like way out here. Like it's not fitting to the card, right? It's just like it's just stretching the width of the page. You can see that when I like slide this divider here. It's just taking up the whole page, which is really ugly. So something we can do is under the card style, we can add a thing here called we can do another object fit. Whoops, object fit. And oh, I think it's just, hold on. Let me open it up. I'm sorry. Yeah, there's so many of these that like it's so hard to keep track of. I'm sorry, it's not object fit. Okay, because the thing we want to modify is the width, right? So we want to do width, and you could put like 200 pixels to match the width of the image. A better way to do it, because you ideally just want to have one number you want to change, is just do fit content like this. And so there we go. It just snaps to the card. And so now, if we modified our image, you can see the card like fits to it. That's pretty cool, right? So I'm gonna keep it at 200 though. Okay. So the second issue is that you can see this image, it doesn't have rounded corners, even though our card has rounded corners. So we could fix that by going into here, and this is the way I'm going to do it. Border radius, 10 pixels, so just match it. But there's a couple of things that are weird. The first thing is that the bottom corners are rounded, which like maybe you don't want that. Maybe you just want the tops to be rounded. So the way we do that is instead of doing just one value for border radius, you do 4. And each 4 of those correspond to the 4 different corners, starting from the top left and going clockwise. So I'm going to do 10 pixels, starting at the top left, 10 pixels, so that's this one, and then 0, 0. You don't have to put pixels if you put 0, by the way. That's why I didn't do that.
You don't need commas.
No, yeah. For some reason, like CSS doesn't like commas. I don't know why. So you can see here with our conditional thing as well, there's not a comma. It's just card image. Same with this. No commas. So there will be commas later, though. But that's later. Okay. Good. Cool. So the second issue, which is like, this is so like nitpicky, and you might not care about this, but I do. If you zoom really far in, you can see that the border radius of this, it's like not covering this, and that is like so annoying. The reason for this is it's just geometry, it's just math. So what we have here is the card is 10 pixels, but we have a 1 pixel border, which means we should actually make this 9 pixels. I know it's super nitpicky, but just kind of a rule of thumb is when you have a border, you just, whoops, 9 centimeters, my bad. Just as a rule of thumb, when you have like a radius and you have a component inside of there, you just do the radius minus the border size. And if that doesn't make sense, yeah, you can still see it's like, oh no, it's good, we're good, okay. That's just the pizza picture, it's just weird. Okay. We're good on that front. Okay. So the second issue is this is like right up against the card, right? Like that's super ugly. We want some like breathing room between our cheeseburger pizza and the price. So what we could do is something called padding. And I actually have these on the slide, so we're gonna go back. Okay. Should have pulled this up earlier when you guys were having problems. But this is like a troubleshooting checklist. So like these are like the most common issues in my opinion when you have an error. So sometimes you forget to export it, you forget to import it, you forget that JavaScript only takes one component, so you need to use a fragment or a div and close out your components. So, okay. But now we're going to talk about padding and margins. So what the heck is padding, right? So let's say I had this blue div here, and I want to give and I want to put something inside of it. So I'm going to put this gallery div directly inside of this blue div. So header div, gallery div. I've just like stuck it inside of that div. Does that make sense? Okay. So if I didn't want this gallery taking up the entire space, and I say I wanted some padding, I could do this command, which is to the blue one, I could add padding 50 pixels, and you can see what that did, right? That just added space all around that blue component, and it like pushed everything in, right? And so that's exactly what we want to do with our card. We just want to push everything inwards. But you might be remembering the picture is also in there, and we don't really want to do that to the picture. There's another property, before I get to that, I should have mentioned that, called margin, by the way. And so I think this is probably a better picture here, is that padding, this is just doing the top, it's doing the inside of the div, whereas margin does the outside. You got it?
We have padding bottom.
What was that?
We have padding bottom.
Oh, in this example, yeah. I mean, yeah, in reality, these should be like all the way down because they don't have padding on the bottom. That's a good catch. But yeah, I guess that's just like a good way to illustrate it. It was like this. Okay.
It goes all around.
Well, okay. Yeah, this is not a great visual, is it? So, okay. Just pretend like you have a div of this exact width and height, and we've applied padding to it, which means the top is 50 pixels away from everything inside of it. So that's what padding does. Margin, it takes the outside of the div. So it's basically saying, I want a space 50 pixels above the box, not inside. And then these two, we're using both. You can see it's done both. It's added a space outside and also inside. That makes sense? Okay, great. We'll come back to that slide. So let's say, okay, don't copy me on this one, but if I did padding, just to prove the point here, on my card, you can see it pushed everything inwards. So there's a 10 pixel gap all around the card, right? And again, we don't want that. We don't want to do that to the image. So instead of doing padding there, I'm going to do another one of these where I say dot card, and we want, I believe this is H3. Okay, I'm leaving paragraph out for now because I'm going to do something special with that. Okay, so card H3, I want this header to have a padding on the left. So I'm going to do padding hyphen left. And I don't know, like 5 pixels. Maybe that looks good. 10. Sure. Okay. So we now have a padding on the left of 10 pixels, which is pretty cool, right? And you can do the same thing for the paragraph. Again, I'm separating it for a good reason here. I'll get back to that in a little bit. So we can do padding left 10 pixels as well, like that. Cool. Okay. So the reason why I separated it is because I personally, I mean, this is just like a graphic design thing. You might not notice this. I'm curious, does anyone actually like see something wrong with this card? It's actually, it's interesting. Okay.
Cheeseburger, the cheeseburger and the price are differently spaced.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the spacing here is not consistent. And so, for example, this header is way too close to this image. It's like smushed up against it. Again, this is a graphic design thing. And you can see there's just like this big space here. It's like, what the heck is that doing? So this is where we can use our margin feature. So let's say I want a margin above that header. So I can say like margin top, and I can do like 5 pixels. 10. Sure, that's 7. It's just trial and error, right? That's all graphic design is. Yeah.
If I wanted to like make instead of making the margin bigger on top of the cheeseburger pizza, if I wanted to like reduce the spacing.
Yes. That's a good question. So let's say I wanted to decrease the space between this cheeseburger pizza thing and the price. What I can do, the cool thing with margins that you can't do with padding, is if I did margin bottom, so if it was 0, like obviously that does nothing. Well, actually in this case it does something because the default style actually has some margin. But if I wanted to go more, right, if I wanted to decrease that further, the cool thing with margins is you can use negative numbers. So I can say like -3 pixels, and we've just like smushed it a little closer to the header there. In my case, I want to go a little more, like 5, and there we go. Cool. Okay. We're good? Yes. Okay. So let's say like right now when I hover over this, like nothing happens, right? It's just like you can't tell that it's a button because it's just like a freaking picture. So if we want to make it change when we hover over this card, I could do something with attributes. And what do I mean by that? Well, if I go, you don't have to do it below the card, but I'm gonna do it because it's just more organized. I'm gonna do .card, and then I'm gonna do a colon, and you can see there's just like a ton of different attributes you can add. I'm gonna add one called hover. Hover. So this is saying for a class called card, and when it's being hovered on by your mouse, you can see the pictures here. You can just ignore that. Do curly braces, and okay. So now we can define styles for when the card gets hovered on, which is pretty awesome. So now I'm going to say like, oh, I want the background color, which is a new one, background color. And maybe I'm just going to pick something from this list because I'm lazy. Let's go, that one's kind of cool. I like that one, that's cool. Okay, so now you can see when I hover over it, oh, that's jarring, right? That's weird. I'm also curious too, this is another graphic design thing. Yeah, go ahead.
How'd you get it to do the scroll thing where you just like see the list? How'd you get it to do like the list?
Oh, okay. So by default,
Yeah.
when you start typing without the semicolon background, if you hit tab, it'll
Okay.
suggest, like before you finish typing it, it'll suggest this giant list.
Yeah.
Does that work for you?
Voice.
Yeah, so here, let me just repeat what I did.
Okay.
So I'm in the thing,
Yeah.
and like when I start typing background, do you get this list of like suggestions here?
No.
Oh. You know what? That might just be like a browser thing again.
Okay.
Yeah, this is like, by the way, I was gonna mention this at the end, but when you actually code an app, please do it in like an actual software. Yeah, not Code Sandbox, because you get some inconsistencies like this. For the time being, I guess just, yeah, you can do a hex code or copy the, oops, not that. Whatever, that's fine. Okay. So now, like I said, it's very jarring. Does anyone realize like what's wrong with this, by the way, when I hover over this, like graphic design wise?
Is that the image?
I mean, you could change the image if you want. You can make like a purple overlay, I guess. But
It's hard to read.
yeah, it's hard to read. Is that what you were gonna say?
There's no transition.
Yes, we're gonna get to that in a little bit too. Oh, I'm so happy you mentioned transition. That's like something people don't think about. Okay, so yeah, the text contrast with the background is terrible. Like, you should never use black text when there's a color as a background that's that dark. So to change the text color, it's just color, and you can just type in white. So now you can see the contrast is much better. I actually hate that purple, I'm not gonna lie to you. There we go, look, it worked when I clicked on it. It's like 50-50. I'm gonna go like that. Infinitum purple, how about that? Look at that. Cool. So to your point, it's very jarring because like, you know, I hover over it and it's just like immediately like boom, purple. Before that, by the way, like sometimes like I guess like this is kind of like a trend right now, is to actually like pop the card up, which is kind of an interesting thing. It's gonna look terrible at first, but just trust the process. So that's a property called transform. And if you don't have this list, I'm sorry, but there's a ton. We're gonna use translate y. So what this is doing is it's saying, okay, we have this property called transform, and when we hover over it, we're gonna translate in the y direction a certain amount of pixels. In my case, I'm gonna say -5 pixels, And this is going to be weird because when I hover over it, it goes up instead of down. That's because the origin for your app is in the top left corner. So the y-axis is down. It's really weird, I know. It's because when you scroll, it makes more sense for the y-axis to be that way, the positive direction. So to move things up, you do a negative number. Really weird, right? So a lot of you are probably thinking that looks just terrible, Grant. Like, why'd you tell us to do that? It looks better when you add a transition. So to your point, if we do transition, we can type the name of what we want to transition. So I'm going to say background color. And then space, 0.3 seconds. Cool. Okay, now this is where the commas come in. If I wanted to add multiple transitions, I can do comma, color, because I want to transition the color as well, 0.3 seconds. And I can do, here, let me give you guys a little more room. I can do transform, 2.3 seconds, semicolon. So I'm just taking the property I want to transform, specifying how much time it takes to take that or to do that transition, and then comma the other ones I want to transition. Does that make sense? So now when I hover over it, ooh, yeah, go ahead.
So when you know when to use commas versus when to not?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'd say like when you're when you have something like where you're only focusing on like one property and you have like 4 different criteria, you don't use commas. But when you have something where you're like you actually have different properties separated by each other, or like how do I put this? So like for example, I could, if I wanted to, only transition the background color. And that's like a whole complete line. So it'll only transition the background color. If you wanted to like add multiple, don't ask me why they decided to all of a sudden use commas here and not like, for example, here. That's when you'd use commas because you're specifying different properties. Okay.
Is there like a card unhover where if you like?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. That's like the perfect segue. So yeah, you can notice like when I hover over it, it's like whoa. But then when I switch off, it's like it just snaps back. We hate that, right? We just want to be able to have the same transition back and forth. So the way you do that is there's not an unhover command, but the way you do that is because it's transitioning from this to this, we can add the same transition command to this card line here. So it's the same thing as doing unhover. I mean, but there's not an unhover, but like if there were, that would be the same thing. So you can copy and paste that line, and now you can see it's like, ooh, it's like both. So that's kind of cool, right? All right. We're good. Cool. Okay. Another thing you might want to do, by the way, is like, you'll notice when I hover over this, it's still my mouse pointer. You should have like, the thing going like this. If you want to change it to that to indicate that you can click on it in your hover area, you can add a thing called cursor. Oops, cursor. And then just change it to pointer, semicolon. And now there's a pointer on there. Look at that. Pretty cool. Okay. Okay. Cool. Okay, so obviously, if we wanted like an actual menu, we wouldn't just have one thing. So we could, don't do what I'm doing, by the way. We could go back to our app and just like put in a bunch of cards. And, there's a couple problems. First of all, you can see it just makes a big column of it. And second of all, we would have to make like individual card things for each menu item. When in reality, the thing you really want to do is you want to just have an array of things, throw things in that array, and have this like generatively generate cards, right? I know the formatting is really weird right now, but to do the generating thing, which I'll just do right now. So I'm going to delete these cards that I made. Hopefully you didn't fall. We need to talk about generation. Ooh, generation. Okay, so this is where it gets admittedly kind of complicated because we're going to be switching from JavaScript to HTML so many times, and I'm going to try to walk through this as slowly as I can. So I forgot to mention. So go to your card here, or no, not your card, your app, and we're going to make a list of like the foods we want to make a card for, right? So I'm going to call this food list, or wait, sorry. In JavaScript, you do const for like constant, food list, the name of your constant variable, equals, and then square brackets. That's how you make an array in JavaScript. Okay, so we can add things like the cheeseburger, pizza, in quotes, comma, because we're now in JavaScript, so we need commas, quote, I don't know, like sushi, sure. And let's add a third one, why not? We'll go, I don't know, someone give me a food. It's a
Cotton
good
candy.
cotton candy, there we go.
So weird many.
Yeah. Okay, so we've made this, let me zoom out a little bit. We've made this list here, this array with our menu items. And obviously it's not doing anything because we didn't tell it what to do. So we're going to do something called generation. And this is where it gets kind of complicated. So I'm going to very carefully outline what this actually is doing. So we have a thing like food list, an array, and we want to map this array to generate a component for each item in this list, right? In this case, it's a paragraph. We're going to do a card. So we have the array we want to map in yellow here. We have period, which means what we want to do with the array. In this case, we want to map it. And in between these two green parentheses here, we have what we're going to name each item in this array, like we're storing each item as a variable. Think of it like a loop almost, like you're going through, it's like a one-liner loop, right? And we want to pass whatever it's reading into the component we want to generate. And so this probably looks really weird because you have like this curly bracket here. That's how you switch back to JavaScript. I know, it's really, really, really confusing. So let me just go through this again. You are mapping a food list, and for each food in blue in the food list, we are passing that into a component. And in this case, it's going to generate 3 paragraphs, which each paragraph containing apple, banana, orange. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions about that? That's very confusing. Okay. So let's type this out. So I'm going to delete this card because we're going to do a generative thing. So I'm going to do, again, when you want to switch to JavaScript, you need the curly brackets. So curly brackets. Now we're in JavaScript. I know. And we're going to do food list dot map. By the way, you might be questioning like my choice of case here. When it's a component, by convention, you use something called Pascal casing. That's when you capitalize each first letter of the word. Let me just put it here. Pascal casing is for components. And then we have something called camel casing, which is for like variables and other functions. Or I'll say like functions that are not components. There we go. Okay. That's the convention. Should have mentioned that earlier, but that's why I'm doing camel casing for my variables and I'm capitalizing my components. That makes sense? Okay. So I'm going to do map, parentheses, and then you can name this whatever you want. I'm just going to call it food. So basically, I'm like each time this loop is running, it's assigning whichever one it's on as a variable called food. And we're going to pass that into our component. So in this case, we want to do a card. So I'm going to do card slash. Okay. Wait a second to everyone catch up.
You quickly open card.js again for some reason.
Yeah.
It didn't save anything and deleted a card.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Also, it was off the screen in your picture, but there is a / at the end of the image thing.
Okay.
Self-closing. Okay. Is everyone here? Great. So a couple observations. The first thing is that it still says cheeseburger pizza, so you're like, what the heck? The second thing is that you'll notice it actually did what we asked it to, right? It's just generated the amount of cards that are in this list. So there's 3 items in this list, and it's just done exactly what we told it to. We just said for each item in that list, make a card. And it did that. So that's great. But what if we wanted to actually put the name of the card into the card, right? So this is where we get to props. So props are it just allows us to pass information from one component to another. I'm going to say that again because that's so important. Props are so important. When you use a prop, you are passing information from one component to another component. That's all it is. So for example, we could just make a card function for every single menu item. It's incredibly inefficient. Don't do this. So much repeated code. You can't do the generation thing we just did with it. And ideally, like I said before, if we want to add a menu item, we just want to add it to an array. And it's like, boom, another card. So instead, what we want to do, you have your generation step, which we just did, your array, passing it to an app or your app file. And you use the same file, so you're not actually adding more files, except with this time, it has like individual properties. In this case, like this card has a cheeseburger name, and this one has a price of $20, right? So, much better to do it this way because it's like, it's procedural, right? You don't have to like keep adding more code. So the way you do this is, and I'm gonna do it in my code as well, is you do name equals, that's like the name of your prop that you want to make. In this case, I'm calling it name. You can call it anything. You can call it like apples or whatever. And this is within your component, so before the slash. And then when you want to use that prop in your card component, again, see, this is where the parentheses come in. This is where you put props in there. You can name it anything. It's convention to just do props. And then when you want to use that property, so if I wanted to put cheeseburger there on the generative loop that is doing that, I do props, again, period, meaning what I want to do with props, and the property that I've defined in our app. So if that made no sense, let me do it practically. So let's go to our app, and let's, in here, next to card, I'm going to do name. You don't have to call name. You can call like food or something. I'm going to say name equals, and remind me, how do we switch to JavaScript? Because we're in HTML right now. What was that? Yes, curly brackets. Okay. So now we are in JavaScript. So we've just, again, this is so confusing. We've just gone from JavaScript to HTML, curly brackets, we're back in JavaScript. We have the angle brackets, so we're back in HTML. Curly brackets, we're back in JavaScript. So that's really all you need to know is like angle brackets, we're in HTML. Curly brackets, we're in JavaScript. Cool. So we're just like flipping back and forth. And the thing we want to put in here is just food, because this is a JavaScript variable and we want to call it food, or we want to reference food, which we define here. Any questions about that? That was like, I feel like that was kind of complicated. No? All right. Okay. We're good to move on. I can switch tabs. Okay. So now in card, I'm going to basically put props in these parentheses because we are accessing its properties. And instead of cheeseburger pizza here, again, I'm going to switch to JavaScript. So I'm going to do curly braces, and I'm going to do props dot name. So what did I just do there? Okay. I'm basically referencing a JavaScript variable, which we defined in app to be food, and the property is called name. So we want the property that is name. And so you can see when it generates it, we have the individual names of our list, and that's so cool, right? Okay. We good? Cool. So the cool thing is, like, watch this. I can just add beans. I don't know. And look at that. It added like another card. Like, that's so cool, right? um, so this is like so much more useful because if you had like a database that was continuously changing and you're like adding multiple different things, you want to be able to in real time reflect that instead of having to go back into your code and like add something new, right? So super powerful generation. That's like one of the most important topics in app design. So that's why I wanted to teach it, even though it's a little complicated. Okay, so a couple of problems. The first thing, the price, right? How do we pass the price into this if we're just talking about food? And the image. Okay, so there are multiple ways you can do this. The way I like doing it is just simply changing this to be an array of arrays so that we can say, okay, for this cheeseburger, I want it to cost this much money, and I want it to have this picture. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, pro tip, if you just select the item in the list, not including the comma, but including the quotes, if you just press the square bracket symbol on your keyboard, it'll make it an array. So, I mean, that's kind of complicated. If you don't like that, you can just put it in manually like this. That's fine. But, okay. I'm going to remove beans just to make it easier for me. Okay. Okay. So now we have an array of arrays. So in each of these arrays, I can define something else. I can say like the second entry is going to be the price. So $199.99. And then the sushi, let's go, I don't know. Oops. 19, that's expensive. $9.99. And cotton candy, let's go like $1. Why not? End quote. Okay. Is anyone confused about the syntax, by the way? Like with the strings and the array? Okay, because I know you guys can get programming experience, so great. Okay, so a couple things. First of all, you'll notice that it just puts like the whole thing in there, like cheeseburger pizza, $199.99, sushi $9.99. That's because we're just pulling the entire array. So the way we deal with that is with indexing. So in this name, you can do 0 because it's the first item that we want to reference in that array. Is anyone here not familiar with indexing, by the way? Because I do have a slide about that. Yes, okay. So we now have a prop called name, and it's referencing the first item in our array here. So, it'll automatically update sometimes, so there you go. It's a little nicer. So now what if you wanted to put the price in there? What do you guys think? Any ideas? Okay, I'll just tell you. You'll just add another prop. So it's exactly what we did before, just price equals, and then curly brackets. And then this time we're going to go food 1. Okay. Obviously, though, nothing happened because we didn't change it in our card JavaScript file. But I'll give you guys some time to copy that. Okay. We're good? Okay. So go back to your card. And now you could probably guess what we're going to do. Does anyone want to just tell me what we're going to do? Got this, yeah.
Curly bracket props dot price.
Yes, that's exactly how you do it. Props dot price. Again, because we defined it as price in our app.js, so we want to access that price for this particular component. And you can see we have prices. For the sake of time, I'm not going to do the same thing with the image, but you can imagine the same way holds. You just add a line here to your food list array of arrays, and then just replace this URL with props dot, I don't know, image. or picture or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so I want to move to actually making this look a little better, because right now, you know, they're like in a column, which is probably not what you want. You probably want them side by side. So let's go to our let's go to our app here, app.js, and I want to, how do I want to do this? Okay, so I have here my header, and I have here my gallery of pictures, right? So if I want to modify the format of this gallery, which contains all of these cards, I need to wrap it in another container. So what do I mean by that? Well, I'm just gonna basically, before this generative component thing here, generative component, I'm gonna add a div and close it after the generative component there. And that way, I can basically define a new class. Class name equals, I'm gonna call it gallery. Oops. Oh, I'll let you guys finish, cover that down. So I've just nested all of my cards in a div. Okay. Good. Okay. So again, class name equals gallery. The casing is important. Class, uppercase name. So now I'm gonna go to my styles, and I'm gonna just define dot gallery. So dot meaning class, gallery meaning the name of the class. So if we wanted to make this like not a column, we need to use something called a flex box. So a flex box is basically just a div that just fits your content. Yeah, it just fits your content. It just stretches and morphs itself to like fit the content. So the way to do that, you just go display flex, and then something really weird happens. Okay, so it did exactly what we told it to. It's stretching our div to fit everything in it, but you can see it just goes off screen now, which is like super weird, right? You don't want that. The way you fix that, if you want to wrap it, is you go flex, wrap, and then wrap. So again, there's a lot of properties. You don't have to learn all of them, but there's just a ton, and you just pick them up as you go along. And now, this is really cool because look at this. If I, depending on the device I'm on, it'll like actually adapt to the size of my screen, which is really, really cool. You might not like that they're like right next to each other, by the way. I hate it. So another property that you can put on your tool belt is called gap, and you just specify the pixel amount. And there we go. It's a little nicer. I did 10. Notice with gap, it doesn't do the outsides, it just does the insides, which is super useful. So there we go. Okay. We're good. Cool. So at this point, it is 5:30. I did want to show you how to like actually click on these. So I did, yeah, this is the next thing. So I had like something called event handlers, which basically allow you to click on different things and execute a function whenever you clicked on it. We were going to use the onClick event handler. There's also something called hooks, which basically allows you to like take different parts of the React library. I'm not going to get into that because we don't have time. Which basically allows you to like, when you press a button, it'll actually update the variable. And so that way, like if we clicked on a button, it'll pop up something that has that information, like for a cheeseburger pizza, which is really cool. And that's like the syntax, but we didn't get to that. Like I said, there was so much content and I knew we weren't going to finish it. So these slides will be made available to you guys, but we are out of time. So in that case, where to go from here? Like I said, please don't use Code Sandbox if you want to develop your apps. I recommend Visual Studio, and you actually do a thing where you get your own port when you install React, and you just have like this website that you can just look at, which is like super cool. If that made no sense, I will probably show Infinitum how to do this when they make their web app. Data storage, super important, like databases, storing data, making sure when you refresh the page, it doesn't just like erase your data. else do I have here? Um, yeah, I think that's it. Okay. So please scan this. Please tell me how I did. It's like my first time teaching, so like I do want to do more of these workshops. So it's anonymous, so you can like completely roast me. I don't care. Uh, but yeah. If you have any questions, you can email me, or you can come up to me after class. After the workshop. um, yeah. Do you guys have any other questions?
If Brandon, sorry, if Brandon did part 2 of this, will you join?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
I do want to show you as well. Is anyone done scanning this? Okay. I want to show you like the final product that I was wanting to show you guys. And I just want to like briefly show you like what a hook and what an event handler looks like. So let me go to the home page. Oh, ignore that. I don't think this is the right one. I had so many. This is it. No, not that one. I'll find it. I'll find it eventually. Okay. So this was like the final product I wanted us to get to. I knew we weren't gonna get here because this is just like way too much. But so the result was like when you clicked on one of these, it'll actually ignore that white space. Actually, there's a way to fix that. There we go. Okay, so when you click on something, basically a hook allows you to say like, oh, he clicked on the cheeseburger card, and so we should present the information for a cheeseburger. That's all the hook's doing. The event handler is just saying, oh, he clicked on something. That's all that's doing. And so if you want to see what that looks like, we would have made another pop-up or another component called pop-up. To handle events, you just do handle pop-up, which we define in an on-click property. If you do come to a part 2, I'll like explain this in more detail. But to do the hook, you do useState, and that basically allows you to like change the visibility of this pop-up. So again, if that made no sense, I'm gonna have a part 2 probably. Maybe. I don't know. I'll think about it. And we'll go through that in more detail. But yeah, like also I don't know what I was doing here. Just ignore that. Yeah, any final questions?
Oh, great.
Okay, thank you guys.